Are we here? And yeah, that's close enough, I suppose. Sorry, everybody. Just trying to get this in the proper alignment. Yeah, in a perfect world, I suppose. But okay, so I'm going to share this out with the quickness. Make sure that I have this silence because that is
back to back,
oh, no.
against probably as good, if not.
There you go. Here you go. Here you go. And as per always, give everybody a few minutes to trickle on in for this, and I will share accordingly. But Feliz Año Nuevo, obviously, for anybody who is chilling
For
and
anybody
making
who is
a brief appearance.
chilling for anybody who is
brief mute tab. Great job, Fuego. See, when you're running a couple different browsers, because I've got both Chrome and Firefox and a few other things all going, let's just share this accordingly. But yeah, this is it's gonna be a lively discussion, or so I hope. All about a book that just celebrated 10 friggin' years, man. Pretty exciting. Yeah, that just does not want to stay stationary for whatever reason. But in any event, Feliz Año Nuevo. Ooh. Okay, so just sharing this to the Hail group. If actually, let me paste properly. Come on, man. Okay, so live palaver ahora. I'll quote Bob Barker. Come on down. Right? Yeah. And just another copy and paste. Okay, so that did its proper accord. So yeah, man, already 4 days into the craziness of the 2022s. I know there's been a little bit of lacking luster with all of the reemergence of things right now in the world. And it's kind of taking the wind out of the sails in some cases, whether for my beloved shooty hoops sports and kickball, soccer, or football, whatever you call it on that side of the country. But okay, well, 10 years of this, and we do not know going forward, everybody, if we are going to maintain Tuesday as the book of the month. Even if we maintain Hail to Stephen King on Tower Tuesdays, we may, at least for the live purposes. I still think that it was a lot easier from many that I have talked to about having a book of the month live discussion at the end of the week. But so, okay, well, all of the proverbial things have transpired. So yeah, we're close to double digits. So, yeah, let's see who is already jumping on. Long Days and Pleasant Nights, Fuego. Very excited to discuss this beautiful novel. Austin, a grande gracias. Thank you so very much. And obviously, you know the drill because you're here for just about all of these. So if there is something in particular from the book that you want to toss out, my man, you always implore lots of awesome insight. Okay. Jake sees, yep, he does. Okay. So man, Austin's ready to just start rolling, to quote the Limpy Biz Kitties. But okay. It's been 5 minutes now, so we'll give it at least an extra moment or two before get things rolling proper here. But yeah, this is the 299th episode of Hail to Stephen King. Kind of crazy. I'm trying to reposition myself because this chair is just it's not doing it for me the way I would like. So okay, so now that we're in double digits, everybody, we went from 7 or 8 or whatever it was to now we've got a dozen. So okay, well, let's just get things going proper then, and whoever else jumps on through, very excited for that. So long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I'm known on this level of the tower. Simon Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That's right. I couldn't really hit the, a power metal note right there, but I was sure as shit intent upon it. But yeah, guys, We are obviously here on the horror show, so bienvenidos and welcome and all of that goodness. And Sai King, El Rey, as I so affectionately call him, my favorite author on the planet. And I've been doing this show. We're about to start the 6th year of coverage here, which is really just bonkers to me, but it's been a beautiful journey. This is technically the 299th episode of the show. So next week, there's a lot of different ideas that we're batting around. Not sure if it'll be something pre-recorded or if it will be, a live thing where peeps can actually jump in and interact. But that was one of the reasons why I did the Joe Hill episode last week and just did a little diversion process on Tower Tuesday, because it is the slot that Cecil so graciously allows me to just kind of, roll with. And as long as it's something King related, or even on a broader level than that, just something literary related, because we do have peeps ask all the time that they would like more book coverage. But that's the thing, like books and graphic novels and things of that nature, that aside from a lot of the Sai King stuff when the King Assance was going down back in 2017, otherwise, books don't always, books and comics, they don't trend the way that we would love them to. But thankfully, Cecil does give me free reign on Tuesdays, and that's been the case for a while and going forward. But I was like, do I really want the 300th episode to be a book of the month, or would I prefer it to be something special, singular, different, and distinctive in all of that regard? So that's why we push things up a week. But wow, one of King's absolute best is what we is discussing today. Yeah. 11/22/63, the infamous day here in American history where John Fitzgerald Kennedy, John JFK, he was taken down by a assassin in Lee Harvey Oswald. But it's one of the it's really this and Nan Live On that are the biggest things, where there are so many books that have been written about conspiracies and did Lee Harvey act alone, or was he a patsy as he described himself as being? And so it's captivated for decades. It will forever continue to, much like even when I was a kid in the 90s and they could never figure out who the hell killed Tupac and Biggie. These are the sort of situations where you have these high profile public figures. And yes, I know, comparing a president to a couple of the greatest rappers of all time, just understand the extent of the unsolved aspect of the mystery. Okay, so that's what I would at least throw out there. But yeah, with the fact that it has been just pondered over and debated and argued about for so goddamn long, and the fact that presumably we will never really know. And so for that reason, and also because of the fact that King grew up in this generation, like everybody says that, me being they originally were calling us Gen Y, and then they started calling us millennials. And I hate that shit, because I'm like a couple years after the Gen X cut off, and I still feel like I identify more so there. But nonetheless, they say that millennials, okay, which is I'm at the top head, I guess, in the first few years of that new distinction, and I despise it, but it is what it is. It took over. But so they say that, whereas like my parents' generation, for instance, everybody knows where they were the moment they found out that John F. Kennedy was shot, and in part, his brother Bobby, and obviously with Martin Luther King and stuff. So, and it was such a scary and such a rough time. But the point being, everybody says millennials, they remember where they were when they saw, towers and all of the horrible nastiness of that. And then in turn, my parents' generation and those who were a little older than them, or probably not too much younger than them, because my parents are, recently retired, let's put it that way. But yeah, man, it is a very scary dichotomy just to know that it was such a horrible, hideous, prolific thing in our nation, that both of those instances, and they will never be forgotten, obviously. But 11/22/63, this monster of a book that King had been wanting to make since the early 70s, from what a little bit of my research was leading me to believe. And so this is an idea that he had even before he was working on Carrie. And I think he was already at work on Salem's Lot. But this is another one where and you see it in so many of his other books, where he mentions time travel and would you go back and stop, the assassination of JFK? Would you kill Adolf Hitler? This is one of those cliche paradigms, I guess, that not any time, but all too often when you explore time travel and all the consequences that are entailed within it. Yeah, that's going back and stopping JFK, being taken down, is one that a lot of people have talked about for decades and decades at this particular point. And so since King brought it up in so many of his other books, it was refreshing in November of 2011, came out November 8th of 2011, haha. But the fact that he finally got around to pursuing the idea properly and having this rad status time travel aspect, but also exploring, as he already had through so many of the Dark Tower books and various other things like the Talisman, essentially all of the books that kind of tie in with the Tower, the Stand, for instance. But this is another one that acknowledges that there are other worlds than these, and it goes to the I believe it's the string aspect that they talk about at one particular point in this book. But in case y'all didn't know, Spider-Man and What If, and all these different shows, and the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness that's coming out. So it's been a thing for quite a while, in most notably comics. But I mean, even Kevin Smith, big comic fan, he was about a shared universe, but also, alternate dimensional sort of stuff. And besides the time travel aspect, which we get here, which is really cool, even the current Loki show awesomely explores some of these things. And then you've got Safety Not Guaranteed, you have Back to the Future, you've had, I mean, man, even all the way back to H.G. Wells, writing that original Time Machine book. So I have always been captivated by almost the monkey's paw aspect of time travel stories when they do it properly, and the fact that what you do can have that ripple effect, the snowball going downhill, the butterfly effect, which is, hey, I dig the Cooch Man, and I actually really, that film that Ashton and Amy Smart did, I'm a big fan of that film. Most notably, the alternate ending in the womb. It's pretty nuts, but so the butterfly effect is something that is discussed in this book by King as well, in the fact that it's the ripple aspect, as I mentioned. It's the fact that it's like that awesome episode of The Simpsons, Treehouse of Horrors, where Homer he's got the toaster and it's taking him back to like prehistoric times. And he thinks initially that, just one tiny thing, it's not going to do much of anything. And then in turn it does. And then in one of the other instances where he's going around smushing and smashing and being crazy, yeah, that's where he comes back. And it's, they've all just got tongues they're shooting out. Great episode of that show, by the way. But so nonetheless, I've always been captivated by just that sheer fact of how the most minuscule thing could have these epic, just frighteningly proportional repercussions. And the fact that King finally decided to properly explore something that had been obviously captivating him, heavy on his heart to another degree. And this will be relatively spoilersy, everybody. But after that introduction, if you are a fan of this book, if you have something with regards to a favorite beat, a favorite scene, any thoughts, both positive and negative, because I do not think this is a perfect book, and I will be getting at least to some of my issues with it. But as everybody is still kind of jumping in, I'm gonna slowly slink it on down. Yeah, come on, autofocus. Don't be a son of a bitch. Okay. All right, so back to the top where I saw that Austin was throwing something else on. Jake sees a late 50s Plymouth Fury. Like he sees it a couple times, actually, which is pretty cool. Jake Subaru plate is 23383. Lives in a cottage. Social. Okay. I think it was hidden because of the fact that there's presumed personal information. Like, nah, man, this is fictional characters, as they like to say. But address 19 Bluebird Lane during the premiere of the play. Oh yeah, King was all about Easter eggs in this, man, 100 freaking percent. Even the fact that there's as he's driving up in the dairy, there's even a little bit with a vicious dog. There, at least one that seems to be temperamental. That could it have been posterity of Cujo, somebody that came before. Not 100% sure. Reactor blew up on June 19th. Yeah. He was throwing 19 throughout this entire book. You could tell that he was feeling a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Sentimental and like homesick for the tower. Oh, Andrew T is here. I know this is one of his favorite King books, so that makes me very happy, man. Yes, 60s were definitely nuts, although it does technically start on September 9th of 1958 is where he continually finds himself. But JP is here. Hey, what's going on? Jose Storms is here. Paso buddy, what's going? Alan Holmes says, hey, Jaime, love this show that you do. I've been watching you for like 2 years since I've started reading Stephen King. I'm just coming out of the dark and interacting for the first time now. Well, Alan, it is greatly appreciated. I have lots of longtime supporters of the channel who Interaction is not a imperative thing. All that I care about is those tuning in and hopefully getting something out of the palaver and the discussion about my favorite author. So that's me just saying, hey, there are many who it's like the Michael Jackson meme where he's like just here for the comments and he's like chowing the popcorn and stuff. So okay, Austin gives some more insight. He says, I love the king pretty much predicted Trump's presidency with this line. It's unlikely to happen. Corrected, but never underestimate the American bourgeoisie's capacity to embrace fascism under the name of populism. Well, I know that this topic would definitely rub at least a few of the tail people the wrong way, but that's the thing. King has always worn his political influences and convictions on his sleeve, and so does him talking about the Marxist Leninism and whatnot, and both the pros and the cons of it. Yeah, it's a book that really explores a lot of different themes, from the power of love, talking about time travel stuff, but or the power of television. Yep, without TV, Kennedy would never have beaten Nixon, as he says in that one particular line in the book, obviously. Quick question for you. Can you tell me the meaning of the term reactionary? Oh, boy. That's kind of like saying I pulled a Homer. Yeah. Or the James Lipton sketch on Saturday Night Live, where he's like, I cannot think of a word, so I will make one up. That performance was scrumptious. So there you go. People make up words all the time, and it's probably what happened there. But so guys, 11/22/63, as I mentioned already, November 8th of 2011 was when this 849-page monstrosity was initially released. And there are actually a couple different super deluxe editions that I've been trying to track down for a while. From what I understand, not only do they add a kind of behind the scenes, little miniature documentary of sorts, but even beyond that, there's additional photographs and like pictures and stuff within the volume. So I know they did a extremely limited signed version here in the United States, but then also over in the UK with the different cover. So as opposed to the dashes, they do the 11.22, .63. But those are some of the holy collector grails that I have been trying my damnedest to get a hold of for a while, because I'm sure the little doc that's on that DVD, you can find just about anything on either Vimeo or YouTube or whatever the heck it may be. But yes, so that is what's going down. But it was also, and I did a number of videos about the adaptation that J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot put together a number of years ago. That actually was broadcast on Hulu February 15th to April 4th. And even before we started doing King stuff on the horror show, myself, Cecil Laird, and Marsha Parker reviewed every episode of that James Franco series. And I know Franco is a guy who is on he's on the naughty list of a lot of people, and that's because Homeboy settled out of court for millions of dollars for some nastiness. But I still try my damnedest to separate art from artist, and the disaster that particular artist has found himself in. It's not as bad as a lot of other peeps, He's not Harvey, he's not Manson, he's not. But in any event, I will still defend the performance of Franco in that, and that I think the miniseries is very well done, and especially compared to some other things where, like the Castle Rocks, other stuff that they did on Hulu, I was nowhere near as impressed as I was with the Franco version of it that JJ put together. If you guys have not tracked that down, I'm pretty sure it still streams exclusively on Hulu, but there was a home release that was done at some particular point. But yeah, life can change on a dime, and that's something that you get early on in this novel, is the fact that life, a variation of it that I'm a big fan of. Life comes at you in a hurry. Nah, life comes at you with a fury. And that's where, a lot of the most catastrophic and big time, just earth shattering things that we encounter in our lives, it's the unexpected sort of thing. When we have the time to properly prepare and all that other stuff, you can at least soften the blow to the slightest degree. But yeah, life can change on even a dime. And it's almost with our main character, Jake Epping, but also known as George Amberson. Hello, Mr. Amberson. But yeah, so Jake went through a rather nasty divorce with a spouse who is an alcoholic. And so this is King once again exploring just the amount of positivity that treatment can bring, but also examining in a lesser kind of subplot level with regards to Jake, the denial that heavy drinking can bring about within people, and it's a bridge that King had to cross himself in the late '80s, and so it's understandable that he would continue and still does to a degree to inject these sort of things into his narratives. And so Jake is accused as his marriage is crumbling, and some flashback stuff we get at the beginning of this novel about just being very, very cold and very loveless and very stoic and just not as properly affectionate and loving as his Kristen, anyway, as his wife, who is, been cheating on him and is ready to peace out, walk out the door. And so he's a teacher that is kind of in a rut, but he is still taking on additional tasks to just kind of get his mind off of all of the sadness that that crumbling relationship brought within him. And so, as opposed to doing the regular, I believe it's Lisbon High School is the place that he's at. So LHC, but he's also doing some evening classes for adults that are trying to get their diplomas and GEDs. And so that's where he meets this dude named Harry, otherwise known as Hoptoe Harry, who is a janitor at the school, but one who has, despite experiencing a lot of nasty shit in his life, including a tragic demise of his mother and his siblings, him being the only survivor, he has still been able to persevere. And he writes this essay for Jake, and it affects Jake so significantly that it turns into a situation where when Jake is kind of getting caught up with his buddy, Al, I want to say, is the name of the guy Al Templeton, the guy who owns Al's Diner, where he can somehow sell burgers for like a $1.19 or whatever it is. And nobody can seem to figure out how the hell he keeps his place open and maintains a profit. But so Jake gets down on some palaver with this buddy of his, Al, who owns this diner he's been frequenting for a while. And Al has apparently found a thinny of sorts, if you want to get into some tower talk. And he has been periodically jumping back to that particular day that I mentioned, September 9th, 1958. I believe it's like 11:58 a.m., something like that. Yeah, there you go. So it's like right at noon, and it's the 9th of September, my youngest brother's birthday. And so as opposed to being able to choose where you're trying to jump, you got the flux capacitor capabilities and all that shit. No, this is one where it is definitely a door to a specific spot. And so, yes, it is a two-way door. So it's the thinny. It's like our little portal area. But whereas in the miniseries, Jake goes in and he stays in there and he just forges on. And if you want to see more in-depth talk about the series, once again, I revisited it recently, but we also have original broadcast reviews of all of those episodes. So I'm not here to do like massive compare and contrast, obviously, but in the novel, as opposed to like in the show where Jake goes once and he stays there, Jake makes a bunch of different like jumps back and forth, and he's wrestling with whether he should actually do this or not. And it's those interactions with none other than Hoptoe Harry, Mr. Dunning, that really push him over the edge, because Al is not twisting Jake's arm and he's like, "Yo, we have to go back in time and save the president and great Scott." Yeah, it's not quite to that degree, but it's a personal connection and a possibility of that is really just what breaks the proverbial camel's back for Jake to actually go back in time, go on this awesome adventure. And it's a lot like that Creepshow 3, the season episode 2, where there's the wardrobe, like the huge wooden area to put coats and stuff like that in. And whereas that guy in that particular Creepshow episode, he would go in there and no time would really pass outside. It was like you stepped in and then we're stepping right back out. It's kind of similar to that. Obviously, this book is 10 years old now, so they could have. There's a lot of idea borrowing that goes on from My Beloved Psy King. Let's just be fair about that. But it's the fact that he goes in and only 2 minutes elapse in Keystone Earth, presumably here in our world, but still living all those years on the other side, and that's what happens with Al. And that's why he's like, "I need you to continue what's kind of become my life's work, Jake. No, my life's work is not throwing out sliders. It's trying to make the world a better place by having what is presumably a major, just momentous instance averted in the death of JFK. So after Jake goes back and has not only the experience of the late 50s and how much better the food tastes and how much cleaner the air is and all this stuff, it's really not until he goes and experiences his first swing, so to speak, at saving this Dunning family. And so then he's convinced, and yet he realizes that, okay, I'm showing up in 1958 in September, so I'm going to need to be here for 5 years, November 22nd of 63. So he's going to have to be in the past, oh my God, it's the past for over 5 years. And so it's definitely it's a tall order and it's a big commitment. And yet he, after a few just less than desirable attempts, and also with Al divulging that he's got this terminal cancer and then how he kills himself. That's killed yourself, buddy. You killed yourself. Yeah, it's definitely rough in that regard. And their rapport, their kef and their palaver between Al and between Jake, it's really cool, man. It's very much like the kind of dynamic King likes to go for with, some of the father issues that he obviously has from a dad that ran out. He really doesn't even have to be like a kid with a grandfatherly figure. I mean, this is a dude in his 30s and he's buddies with this older, like fatherly type sort of guy. So yeah, I can see why King, just with various other things that he goes back to the well about, but it's one that obviously means a lot to him. But so there's an interesting thing that Al says at a few particular points early on before he gives up the ghosts and, the clearing at the edge of the path and all that. But he proceeds to tell Jake that anytime you return back to, so you jump over there and you jump through that thingy, and then you make your way back to, the present and whatever alterations that you have made. But if you jump back in again, that's where Al is like, yeah, it's just it's a clean slate, wipes it clean, complete reset, all that different stuff. But the interesting thing that it's discussed at the very end of the book, but also some musings from Mr. Epping, or should I say Amberson, a few different points in this book. He's like, but if it's wiped completely clean, it's a complete reset, then how is this guy who spends so much time right around the thingy and obviously can sense its power and the urgency and everything that is tied in with it there, how is this yellow card man able to have his appearance slightly changed? He goes from a little more aggro to a little less aggro, but the biggest thing is the changing of the card color up on his hat. And so it starts out yellow, but then after a trip or two it turns orange, and then eventually it's black. And I mean, so even though they don't really explain that character as much as I personally would have preferred that they did, it's still one of the, I'm not going to say a mystery, but it's something that it's underdeveloped. And the fact that Cal, as we find out his name is near the end of it, they're like, yeah, he does have a name. You just never took time to actually figure it out, Mr. Epping. But yeah, it's a subplot of the story that I really wish could have been developed at least a little bit better, because it is an intriguing sort of idea about just because, okay, even with like with the canyon in Wizard and Glass, when our young Ka-Tet is bringing all of them in the eyeball and they're going to kill them all, just the residing so close to it and hearing that reverberation and almost like you're touching a battery. Anybody who's read the Tower books, that this is a big thing. So if you were that close to an area where you can do an interdimensional jump, I'm guessing that's why the yellow card man is as just mucked up in the head as he is, because of the fact that, yeah, he's been residing right around this area of immense amounts of energy that will, if you're around it too much without diverting away, as you guys know, with the beer bottle bit that you get. And I think that's with the black card man. But so in any event, yeah, I mean, if I'm going to go into criticisms of any particular variety with this, is that I will say, and I've mentioned this with quite a few different King books, this sucker, it's pushing 900 pages, okay? 849, as I believe I mentioned. Yep, approximately 849 pages. So this is one that definitely starts to repeat itself a little bit in the middle portion, and I would contend it loses some steam as well. So it's yet very streamlined though, in the fact that it's not a arduous sort of approach like with Under the Dome or Sleeping Beauties, where you have like a large cast of characters and you're trying to keep them all straight and you're trying to be like, oh, who do I identify with? Who do I like? Whatever. It's a little bit less of a problem in this because it's really you have Jake and you have Al early on, and then I mean, this is a love story, everybody. It's one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite Psy King books ever. And so, yes, when Jake, after jumping around from a few different places, because yeah, he goes up to Derry. That's where he gets the job done, trying to save the Dunning family from this insane butcherous mofo of a husband slash father. So after he takes care of business up there, he's like, okay, you may want to lay low for a little while because I think you may be wanted for murder. So he's like, okay, I'm going to pull a Psy King and drive from Derry, a.k.a. Bangor, if you want to just be reminded about who King mirrored that city off of. But he knows he eventually has to get to Dallas, but he has years to get to Dallas at this point. So yeah, he saves the Dunning family to a degree without spoiling stuff too hardcore at that particular Halloween the second time he goes back. And yet he makes his way all the way down to Sarasota because, Psy King spends half of his year up in Maine, like, the New England area. And then he spends the other half. He's the epitome of a snowbird at this particular point. He loves him some Florida. And that's where Jake, a.k.a. George, makes his way down to spend some time in Sarasota. But this is where you get a similar thing to where I'm like, King taking some cues from Back to the Future, my dude, with the sports betting and everything. And true, I mean, would that not be the smartest way to make sure that, as somebody who's been doing some sports betting recently, if you had all of the results, I mean, that almanac that Marty has in the second book that Biff causes to, make alternate timelines and all that different shit. Yes, you get that sort of flavor in 11/22/63, but it's a fine line to kind of walk, as Jake slash Georgie finds out very, very quickly, in the fact that, yeah, if you go in, especially back in 1958, and you're like, I'm going to drop a $500 bet. I don't even know what, the adjustment for inflation is, but $500 back in the day when you could buy a candy bar for like, a nickel, I don't even want to think about how much. But of course, he wins, and he gets these nefarious peeps on his trail, and that does play into the fact that he leaves Florida earlier than he initially thought that he was going to, and he makes his way to Dallas. But he kind of scopes out the situation a little bit and all that, but he still has years to get through. And so that's where he ends up in Jody. And that is where he meets up with none other than the lovely Sadie. He makes some great friendships with Deke and Mimi and everything. So I do appreciate that middle portion of the book. But the problem is that after getting the excitement and the confrontations in Derry, and also, how can we not say the fact that we have that great little Easter egg of Trash Mouth and Bevy from the Levee dancing around in the park, and the fact that since this is 1958, they're not even a year removed from all of the shit that went down in it, and so everybody in the town is still acting weird. It just further confirms something that King even hinted at with like Dreamcatcher, and even to a lesser degree in the fact that there's still laughs in the drain, that he mentions in Tommyknockers. And so Derry is a place that is always just going to have that sort of residual evil, and it clouds the judgments and the interactions of so many of the natives. And it's something that Jake figures out pretty quickly. He's like, this place is weird, man, and most of the natives are very strange and can't seem to figure it out. But yeah, so I mean, we have the excitement of him taking care of business in Derry and making his way towards Texas. But once he gets to Texas is definitely where things slow down significantly. I do think that Psy King's editor could have been like, yo, let's not have a couple different kids get in. Like, I mean, okay, I appreciate the stuff with Jake taking over, with the drama department and getting these football players out of their skin and just checking out anything as far as theater goes and dramatic work and stuff. And so It's very endearing. But did we really need to have 3 different plays over the course of the middle of the book? And did we really need to have one character disfigured and then another character disfigured and then in turn another character disfigured? So once again, these are very, very minor gripes about the book, but I do feel like in the second act where you're just waiting for the confrontation to finally transpire, and if Jake is successful, will he change the future for the better? These are the big pressing questions. And you have a love story in the middle, which is probably the only thing that really keeps me engaged is everything with Sadie and Jake and their just blooming romance. And yet some of the issues that, since both of them are coming from divorces essentially, and just all of the negative baggage that comes with that. So yes, I've talked about this on the show before because it's one of my favorite love stories that King has ever done, despite the fact that there are tough and tragic aspects about the fact that they're both from different times and everything. But yeah, I do dig the romantic stuff and the pitfalls, and the fact that there does eventually manifest trouble in paradise. And so yeah, they go their separate ways, and then you just know 100%. Even before I had watched 1122, the series, you just had to know, with all of the heavy-handed foreshadowing that Sai King is doing, that the husband of Sadie is eventually going to show up, and there is going to be some sort of confrontation. So you have these various layers of the proverbial tower of storytelling within this. So you've got different levels of evil, as far as you've got the very close knit personal evil with psycho husband of Sadie, and then you also have like the bigger, grander picture and the grander scheme of things, and that's sort of, what are you going to do? Towley, are you going to choose your friends, or are you going to choose a toke? Sort of a situation. And yeah, that it's a theme that not just Sai King, but so many other peeps. I mean, even think of the first Tower book, where he's like, are you going to pursue Flagman, or are you going to actually like lift me up and save me, bro? Save me, bro. We all know how that went down. But yeah, man, as far as like epic storytelling, as far as Sai King, in my estimation, trying to write the great American novel in a lot of ways, the previous time that I feel like he attempted doing this and was as successful was with the Dead Zone. Now, the Dead Zone had a little bit more of a horror tinge to it. This gets only dark in a couple patches here and there. More so than anything else, this is the type of story that I would imagine just endeared Sai King to so many more people. That, I mean, okay, those who read Shawshank and those who got into, I don't know, Dolores Claiborne, obviously Misery, stuff that wasn't as horror centric. This is probably one of the least horror centric things that he has ever done, and it's freaking fantastic. I'm trying to double check to make sure that there aren't any other things here, since we are at just nearly the hour mark already. But yeah, the fact that he spent 7 weeks in Derry, it's a bit that was omitted from the 11/22/63 series, but it's interesting how they streamlined that show and cut out certain plot beats, most notably, the various plays, like I said, in the middle of the aspect, and various accidents and various people needing reconstruction and stuff. I do like when the gambling guys finally catch up to Jake, and it does give, as we hit our third act in this book, a little bit more just tension and I don't know, just the edge of your seatness, so to speak. And that's just a phrase and not a proper use of terminology. But yeah, I mean, the anxiety level definitely goes up in the third act, where those peeps finally track down Jake. And this is already after the disposing of Sadie's husband, and him. That's definitely one of the beats that is the most grisly and gross, is where when the husband has taken Sadie captive and Jake and Deke are trying to rescue her, and the estranged husband like cuts like a triangle almost like out of her cheek. It's so bad, and so she needs her, and her eye is all effed up and drooped down and stuff. And so yeah, that and that's a bit that in the TV series, from what I remember correctly, was actually done pretty convincingly. But yeah, the middle of the book, as we are just waiting to get to Dallas, and there's like newspaper clippings about suspicion of Lee doing this, and also the fact that Jake is going in to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and he's like trailing, Lee and his young wife, and just spying. And the aspect of the spying and the surveillance is cool. I mean, yeah, I like Stakeout, and to a lesser degree, another Stakeout. So, but yeah, much like what happens with the television series as well, I do feel like the book drags a wee bit in the middle as we are just awaiting very anxiously this final sort of confrontation. Yeah, you're not supposed to be here. Just cracks me up every time. And also, this is a bit of just interesting insight that King throws out. And I think I had this on my computer at one particular point. Ever notice how many funny fellas got a mean streak? And this is where they were actually talking about Papa Dunning and the fact that he's a charmer, and he is much beloved by all these people all across Derry. And yet, in the same right, there's a few who are a little bit more perceptive, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he's making jokes, but he's more of a bully. He's making like mean ass jokes. He's being a prick." But yeah, so another one that King most definitely, just going back to the well a little bit about. Of course, Jake decides to start writing in the boredom of trying to have things to do, and he's like, "Hey, I can't track Lee Harvey Oswald. I can't be after Ozzy all day." So he's like, "Oh, I'm going to start writing." And so he's working on two different things. He's working on one thing called The Murder Place, which he essentially used his stay in Derry as inspiration. And so he's even writing about like a killer dressed as a clown and stuff. And I'm like, okay, King. Yeah, I know we're going meta with this. And, I mean, hey, he put himself in one of his own stories. So I can't put any of that shit past him. But yeah, he's also working on the other book, which is essentially what we end up reading in 11/22/63. The past is Amaret. Yes, exactly. So here is a little passage from relatively early on in the book. This is from page 149 that I was fond of. And that's another thing. This has a lot of good quotes to it, but it's very narrative heavy. And that's why I, just to double down, was saying that I think if King had trimmed like 100 or so pages or whatnot, he could have kept maybe that brisker pace in the middle of the book that you kind of retain at the very end. But okay. Yeah. So this is right around the time that Homeboy is getting to Derry. So with me just talking about Derry, this is very very proper context. How should I tell you about my 7 weeks in Derry? How to explain the way I came to hate and fear it? It wasn't because it kept secrets, although it did. And it wasn't because terrible crimes, some of them still unsolved, had happened there, although they had. All that's over, the girl named Beverly had said. The boy named Richie had agreed. And I came to believe that too. Although I also came to believe the shadow never completely left that city with its odd, sunken downtown. It was a sense of impending failure that made me hate it, and that feeling of being in a prison with elastic walls. If I wanted to leave, it would let me go, willingly. But if I stayed, it would squeeze me tighter. It would squeeze me until I couldn't breathe. So just double down once again. Well, triple down. The triple stamped it. No erases. But yeah, there's a lot of really great prose within this. I definitely want to make mention of that. This is in my S tier, man, as far as the tier rankings that we did of these particular books. Yeah, the future was on strings, just like a puppet. That's another thing. King makes a lot of very interesting comparisons and references in this particular book to how dance is life, and how just memory is like memory, as in the past, is where harmony is brought to the present. I mean, he's got so many of these interesting little isms, King-isms, I guess, in this particular bit. And also, back to that string theory thing, similar to what we even got in Insomnia, in Everything Dark Tower, as you get into the later installments and stuff. But so when one of these new strings, because every time you reset, you're not actually resetting, you're just creating a completely new timeline. And so if you've watched, once again, the Lokis and the What Ifs, and there's this other movie I watched recently called Multiverse, and DC is about to do it with their Flash movie and having multiple Batmans. And I mean, yes, the multiverse is very in vogue right now. But yeah, I enjoy just a very simple explanation of the fact that, okay, it's not a paradox. Okay, there is residue that is left behind, and so the residue would be the equivalent of the fact that the yellow card man now has a orange card. So it's almost identical, but it's probably similar to what we got in the fourth book, for instance, Wizard and Glass, where our new Ka-Tet shows up in Topeka, but it's not quite their Topeka because there's Nozzle Cola instead of Coca-Cola. So you have to think about how many times did Al actually use that? And when you get to the green card man at the end of the book, when you do realize that, yes, he saves the day, he saves our president. However, the new timeline that he has created, that at least Jake is going back to, because you got to imagine all those other, splintering timelines still exist. But the one that Jake is actually going back to through that particular thingy, through that particular door, yeah, it's post-apocalyptic for the most part, and destruction of the city. And although Harry is back alive after dying in the Tet offensive, after trying so hard to fix up that particular loose end, but so yeah, it doesn't always work out. It's not always the end of the first Back to the Future, man. It's not. It's not. You're finding Jennifer and everything is hunky dory. It more often than not, I would imagine, veers into my favorite in the trilogy, which is Back to the Future 2. All the way up to 2015. Will we ever get there? Yeah, it would be wonderful if we could. But I do like the whole residue aspect, as opposed to, because I feel like the term paradox is a much more loaded term, and so for that reason, it's not as explored in as heavy-handed of a fashion as you get in some of these other sci-fi films that we've done, and also just even other Kingism stuff. Like, this is not quite as hefty as or as some of the later Tower books, or and even some of the stuff in Black House. But nonetheless, this is like essential King reading in my estimation, despite the fact that, yes, it is extremely hefty in its page count, but it's so damn good. And Jake Epping being one of my favorite protagonists, and also the fact that it does inject so much of that hopeless romanticism and trying so hard to, like, if you have watched the Doctor Strange What If episode on Disney Plus, you almost definitely understand the plight of Jake and the fact that you so desperately want to save somebody, but can you? Can you transcend time and space? Can you make that shit like The Fountain, that incredible film that was done by it's not Holland. His name is eluding me, but yeah, nonetheless, this is, and it's got one of the best endings of any King thing too. Like, I must admit, they say King can't stick the landing a lot of the time, as far as having something poignant, having something that really feels like it properly wraps everything up. 11/22/63 is legit one of the best that King has ever done, and especially as far as just giving you that contentness, and the fact that it is so sweet in Jake realizing that he can't continue just going back over and over and over. And so for that reason, he decides to just let it go. But just going back, and she's in her 80s and everything, and they share the little dance bit, and it's just the last few things, especially with the fact that, Jake, despite all of his efforts, it didn't really end up changing much of anything. So it really is much more so about the journey as opposed to the destination, I guess. But the journey and the love that he experienced from Sadie, even though he didn't accomplish the ultimate mission in the way that Al had obviously envisioned it, the most important thing is that he got to spend years with somebody and fall in love and feel that redemptive aspect. And yet you feel bad for him, because he describes himself as, a man without a time frame, because of the fact that, he came from 2011, but yet he had spent all of those years in the past and then gone back to present time. And yet present time feels weird because he had adjusted to, yesteryear. And it's just, it's cathartic. It's very, very solid stuff. And, King has a great afterword here in the back here, but the very end, I was getting teary eyed as he, sorry, clumsy, because Sadie is notoriously clumsy, and then, like, falling over stuff and whatever. And he's like, "You always were, Sadie." one of your most endearing traits. Before she can ask about that, I slip my arms around her waist. She slips hers around mine, still looking up at me. The lights skate across her cheeks and shine in her eyes. We clasp hands, fingers folding together naturally, and for me, the years fall away like a coat that's too heavy and too tight. In that moment, I hope one thing above all others, that she was not too busy to find at least one good man, one who disposed of John Clayton's fucking broom once and for all. Yeah, the broom analogy with just the creepiness of her former hubby. Anyway, she speaks in a voice almost too low to be heard over the music, but I hear her. I always did. Who are you, George? Someone you knew in another life, honey. Then the music takes us. The music rolls away the years, and we dance. And that is something that I haven't seen a lot of people state as much about this, because it gets so caught up in the just theories and, was there government interventions and all this different stuff, and conspiracies. But at the end of the day, this book does boil down to, despite the fascination aspect with all of that, it does boil down to a epic love story that spans time and space, in a lot of ways, time, space, age, all that different stuff. And it's incredibly endearing to me in that regard. And just, I mean, one of my absolute favorite protagonists in all of the Kingverse is Mr. Jake Epping. But I have just been ranty danting, and I did not. No, well, yeah, I was just going off, guys. So, okay, let's see what I have missed. Huzzah. Okay, trying to get through Under the Dome. Audiobook, says JP. Haven't listened to 11/22/63 yet. Heard a lot of good things. Yeah, and the audiobook is wonderfully written, or excuse me, wonderfully read, derp, by none other than, it's of ill importance. The narrator, it's not Will Patton, let's put it that way. It's not one of the more understandable go-tos. Okay. The narrator is amazing in this one, says Austin. Yes, I completely concur. Okay, Donovan Chilton says 11/22/63 is fantastic. I'm actually about to read Under the Dome for my next king. Yes, Hulu has it on their service. Yes, I was hoping that they still did, since you never know when something is going to disappear from all these different streaming services, man. So I still have the shelves and shelves of my physical media. Jose Storms chimes in again and says, I've only seen some of the Hulu adapted, but I haven't read to the book yet. Okay, and then we've got, Joe Esposito says, one thing that wore on me with this book was the Epping character being born in 76, yet being so deeply and personally affected by JFK's death. Yeah, I completely agree. And that's where King, and when he was born, it comes into a lot of his different writing, Joe. I mean, even for instance, some of these books where King has kids like today, and they want to go back and watch the old Universal monster movies, and they want to play board games and stuff. I'm like, I have a lot of friends with children around that age, nieces, nephews, lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And I don't see that sort of excitement and interest, but perhaps in different parts of the country. There's no way Epping would harbor what that resents towards Oswald when he did live through that event. It's like asking to do a kid born in, well, I mean, okay, so born in 76, 63. Yeah, true. Yeah, that's all I'm thinking. So that would not have been, it's obviously King injecting his own personal ethos in here. I know King has always been political, but the love fest and outright contempt for anyone who doesn't worship at the JFK altar in this book was off-putting. Yeah, all of the characters in it, I will agree. It is, but hey, it's King's prerogative, man, to just kind of leave that stuff on the. Okay. Way too allowed it to be Tuesday already. Yeah, well, days, especially like it's a new year, and they just keep flying on by. Damn, yo. Late to the party this evening. This for me is King's best work this side of the year 2000. Love the adaptation too. Yeah, Carl. It is easily one of the absolute best things, and I probably put it in his top 10 books ever. And it's really this and Revival and maybe Doomickey. Those are the three all too often that we have not got not the proper attention for. 11/22, I think, got a little bit of it because of the Hulu adaptation, but that was before the Great King Assance that happened happened shortly thereafter. So, okay, Chad Quick says, good afternoon, evening, everybody. Glad I made it on time. Sort of 11, 2263 is one of the top 5 favorite psychic novels. I love the time travel aspect. And Chad, I'm right there with you. I highly recommend Time and Again, which King mentions at the end of the novel. It's a great book. And yeah, you had me suddenly thinking, Chad, of Time After Time, and not that awesome song by Ozzy, but I think it's called Time After Time. It's late 70s. It's got Malcolm McDowell, and it's Mary Steenburgen too, I want to say, who was in Back to the Future 3. If we're going to start trying to Kevin Bacon this shizzle. But yeah, Time After Time is about Jack the Ripper going forward in time to San Francisco, I want to say, and trying to kill some fools. But it's got a romantic aspect as well. So, I think it's cool. Is it a thinny though? Thinnies are loud and have tentacles and can talk to you. Well, I have always used the term thinny for just any sort of area where you can jump, Joe. And I mean, I kind of the house in DT3, where where Jake is making his way over. Yeah, because we had a character named Jake in this, and so where Jake is jumping, through the house in the third Dark Tower book, in Crouch End, where obviously when they're in that strange little place just outside London, that like it doesn't necessarily have to send you to like even a thinny would be in what book at the end of 5 or 6 in the Dark Tower, where they're jumping through that cave that the Manny have under their control. So at least for me personally, I do not just connect thinnies with the Lovecraft aspect of it's going to take you into it's just where reality is thin, and so it could take you somewhere almost identical to yours, or it could take you to another dimension that is just as similarly overlapping as ours, but as opposed to being almost identical to ours, it's the deep recesses of like the void, Lovecraft hell. But that's just me. Okay. I do like the backstory for the Yellow Card Man in the series, where he's also a time traveler to save his daughter. Yeah, and Austin, you're totally right, because that is something that it's been a year or two since I watched the series, but I did think that they tried to expand and give a little bit more context to readers that just wanted more, a little bit more to sink their teeth into. You should have had Jake succeed earlier in the mission, but have him deal with more than the fallout, I felt. We only get a cursory explanation of the bad side effects of saving JFK. Yeah, that is one bit that I can also kind of second that emotion, is the fact that you do get to the future, the JFK surviving future, but it's really just the Green Card Man giving a shit ton of exposition and explaining some things. Or wait, no, it's not even the Green Card Man. It's that other version of Harry that we get. But yeah, it's not quite as, that aspect of the conclusion is nowhere near as fulfilling as the conclusion of the love aspect of the story, and just the reunion between Sadie and Jake. That's what puts this one so high up for me. So that would have been interesting, having Jake deal with the fallout and conditions there. Yeah, it was kind of like a super, super mega happy ending of sorts. Okay, Joe, that could have been the main plot point. It would definitely make a good novella. Explore that sort of thing just a wee bit more, as opposed to the conveniences of wrapping it up in that nice little proverbial package. An online inflation calendar said $500 in 1958 would equal about $4,800. Wowza. Yeah. So if you were, but I mean, I have a lot of friends that are, they're rolling right now with their sports betting. And so they're coming at it pretty hard. I don't know, to each their own, I suppose. Now, I realized that about halfway into the book that Oswald was going to shoot Sadie. Yeah. Epping to me was not a likable character. There was too much author intrusion. He never felt like a real guy. It felt like I was reading about what SK would do in this scenario. But, for me, I mean, it's not really that different than like a Ben Mears in my estimation, as far as somebody who is not completely squeaky clean, that not as captivating as certain other characters. But once again, Joe, to each their own. I have you are not the first peep that I have seen, though, that has been like, I just didn't like our lead as much. Not a likable character, too much like the author. Yep. Okay, did the sheer condescension with which King treated the idea that JFK acted alone bother you, as if it's so impossible that he had help? It's basically been proven that the mob was behind it. Yeah, that's where I have not gone to any extreme research lengths with regards to this. I mean, I've seen obviously the Oliver Stone film, and I've seen a few things on like Nat Geo and read some stuff in like Life magazine and whatever growing up. But I know that there are a lot of extreme opinions about how all of this went down. Hello, Stephen King nerd says, Baby Outlaw. I felt King did time travel really well with this novel personally. Yes, I completely concur. Obsessed with time travel. Yes, as am I. Give me any of them. What's everybody's favorite time travel movie before we wrap things up here as we approach 90 minutos? My friend just started her own Stephen King journey. Awesome. Starting with Carrie. Yeah, I mean, best place to start, in my opinion, is always at the very beginning, just to see how the craft is kind of expanded upon and improved. And so, okay, awesome audiobook. Yep, Andrew T. I totally agree with you, man. Long way to go then. Yeah, most def. Welcome. Okay, I'm almost all caught up yet. Time after time, Cindy. Well, there's also a great Ozzy song. Time after time, they say that love is love, and that's my making fun of. Okay, sorry, Osman. Love Holly Gibney. Carl, I love Holly Gibney as well, but I'm definitely a little burnt out on her being in just about everything, which is why it was refreshing when she didn't pop up in Billy Summers. I was just like, oh, nice, okay. We can tell our own stories. My name is Steven, and I like to write scaries. New favorite character. Okay, yep, got past that. Love Holly Gibney. Okay, I'm glad that there is a solid palaver in here. Okay, has to be BT all time. Okay, well, sweets, everybody. Man, and it's too bad since we have over 20 peeps still in here. But that is essentially my thoughts on the massive amount of stuff that King was preparing for decades to tackle with 11/22/63 about for some, obviously, not the most like, he's no Marty McFly, man. He's not of that essence of likability, but yeah, it is definitely to what Joe said. I mean, we even had in Billy Summers just this past year, where it's like, okay, yeah, hiding out and gotta maintain appearances, so I'm gonna start writing. They always become writers or school teachers, I guess, but yeah, for the most part. But so 11/22/63, though, guys, is it one of your absolute favorites? Have you ever read it? Have you seen the terrific Hulu television series? The thoughts, that snide remarks, all of that jazz is always greatly appreciated. But 10 years old now, as of just about a month and a half ago. So that is very exciting. And obviously, Feliz Año Nuevo here. And the fact that it is 2022. I had pre-ordered this sucker from Cemetery Dance, but I don't think they were the ones who actually put this together. But it's pretty dope in the fact that it's a Green Mile themed, like, here, let's check it. So you've got Glenn Chadbourne doing all kinds of awesome art throughout this. And there's like essays. I wrote my essay in Denver. I wrote my essay down in Florida. Okay. So yeah, you've got essays. You've got stuff by Dave Hinchberger. You've got Bev Vincent in here, Tyson Blue, James Cole. And then you've got all kinds of other essays, exposition. This is more or less completely Green Mile themed, but there is also a year in review. So this is done by that Stephen King catalog.com, which is Overlook Connection Press. And they have something coming for the fall of 2022. So yeah, they talk about later. They talk about Billy. But another thing, so you do eventually get into this area where you can write personal notes and like kind of a journal spot. But then you've got games throughout the entire year on the bottom. You've got games, you've got trivia, mice and man. So for every single page, you've got your spots to write. And yeah, cool stuff from Glenn Chadbourne throughout the entirety of this thing. Like, that's pretty rad. Kind of say coffee there. Yeah. So I don't know if this is still available anywhere, but it just arrived on my doorstep a couple of days ago, just in time for the new year. But I extend a grande gracias, everybody who has not only supported this program over the last 6 years, but also those who have, taken the time to jump, especially here midweek. And we know it's tough, and we're still trying to figure out if, at least for the book of the month, we're going to move to a Saturday or a Sunday slot for it live, even if it's just once a month, and then keep Tower Tuesday for the main programs. I don't know. There's a lot of exciting things that are brewing at the horror show right now. And as far as specialty content goes, and we've got Scream here in just a little over a week. So we're excited about that, doing a review of that. We also recently did a big trailer reaction roundup, which has kind of become commonplace. And yeah, 299 episodes. The next installment of this will be 3 Hundeezy, and it's crazy. I can't believe I've been talking Sai King for as long as I have, but there's still so many other things on the docket, including our January book of the month. And this will be celebrating its anniversary in February. And yeah, is it a little weird to want to just jump right to... Yeah, come on out. There you go. Jumping right to 3.5. I mean, because of the fact that this is a story within a story within a story, I kind of contend that of a lot of the DT books, this is definitely one that I think you can just kind of jump into, and it's nowhere near as detrimental of an experience, because so you've got our new Ka-Tet, obviously, in place, but then you also have some great flashback stuff with young Roland and and Jaime. It's great. And the fact that the bulk of the story is with regards to the Covenant Man and a quest to save a mother and something completely different. So come along on the ride with me if you would like. But Dark Tower. Yes. Went through the keyhole. None other than our book of the month for January, here in this new wondrous year that we are still keeping our fingers firmly crossed will improve and become better. Come in and know me better, man. But once again, I've been Jaime and Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube. And yes, some exciting things coming on my solo channel here in the coming days. But a like, a share, a subscribe here on the horror show is supremely appreciated. And for all of those who have supported what is going to be 300 episodes here next week, and whether you're new to the proceedings or just spend time on the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group and see a video every now and again, danke, arigato, merci. Thank you so very much. It means a hell of a lot. So until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego. Sen amigos, constant readers and viewers alike, say thank you. I hope that we have been well met and that we share more of this palaver sooner rather than later. And until then, remember to stay scared and read Stephen King. I mean, either of these, I don't think you can go wrong. So, yeah. We built this city. Happy New Year, all of you.